We're cracking a cold one for the team of lawyers that Google had slapped down the DOJ this week, as Google is not going to have to divest away from their Chrome browser. Apple is still going to be able to cash multi-billion-dollar checks from not only Google, but probably Amazon and Microsoft and Yahoo and all these other companies as well. This comes as the company will announce a new iPhone next week. Broadcom announced blowout earnings as months ago, even last year. I went out on a limb and said the stock would triple. It's already doubled, and we've got a lot more to go. And finally, Tesla rolling out master plan number 4. This as vehicle sales across the globe fall off a cliff for the company. They're also rolling out a new potential pay package for Elon Musk. I've got more browser tabs open ever for this week's FAANG Stock Recap Show. What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are doing well out there. It is time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show. I recap the FAANG stock every single week. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. I've been investing my own money in the stock market for over 25 years. Most of you guys know this. I'm not out here trying to get views. I don't even really need customers. I just want to make you a better investor. And I gotta say, this is one of the best Fridays we've ever had. And so we better kick things off like we always do with Meta Platform. Start of the week at 7:30 and boom, this one up 3%. Finish the week. I'm recording this like 1 minute before the close. So we're bouncing around at 7:51. Somewhat awkward moment in the White House yesterday as Trump ushered in every rich CEO from a tech company that he could find to come in there and essentially kiss his feet. Now, I'm one of these people. I can argue for President Trump. There's some things that I think he does that are a positive, but I also can acknowledge kind of his awkward obsession with these types of pomp and circumstance type things. And this White House dinner just goes along with that. Now, what's interesting though, aside from like the politics and stuff, is you do have people in the room, and I'm sure, business minded that they are. There were probably some pretty deep discussions on the side happening here. And so while it is somewhat awkward for the president of the United States to kind of usher in these business leaders and have a dinner and have cameras there and stuff like that, the fact that all of these companies, executives got together in the same room and had dinner is actually kind of extraordinary, and we'll see if anything comes of it. This comes as Meta is, I didn't know this, but they're launching an app for iPad for their very popular Instagram application. And this could, I know a lot of commerce goes down on Instagram, and obviously the ads there are very effective. And I can imagine on the iPad, it can open up some new formats of ads, obviously larger ads, maybe ads that even convert better from kind of a shopping experience. So we'll see how popular Instagram gets on the iPad. Also, it's potential that Instagram crosses over not into YouTube space, but many years ago, it was kind of a pipe dream that YouTube would be viewed on TVs, like televisions in your living room. Now, I believe almost half of the traffic for YouTube, or a good chunk of it, is actually coming from living room TV sets. So it could be possible that Instagram is kind of setting the stage there to widen the screen there. And from an advertising perspective and just a product perspective, that's exciting for Meta. Now, they continue to go over to Cupertino and poach executives from Apple's AI research team. Now, I have some, we'll call it, quote, inside sources here, because I was like, this is curious, because Apple is being criticized. And look, I've criticized the team a little bit from an AI perspective. Meta's going over there and grabbing these AI researchers. What I am told is Meta obviously wants to pair the hardware and the software. They've got the glasses, they've got other things in the work, the metaverse type of stuff. They've obviously got the Oculus and those types of things. They want to encroach on that a little bit more, some of Apple's turf there. One way to do that, and obviously Apple is a software company that ties it into hardware, so anybody working on any type of software over at Apple also has a close eye on the hardware, because that's ultimately what it gets tied to. And so Meta's going over there and poaching what we view, at least from a press release, as an AI researcher, but this is as much about the hardware as it is about the AI and the software. Now, apparently they made it flirty chatbots, including Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez, the lovely Anne Hathaway, Scarlett Johansson. None of these young ladies slid into my DMs over on Instagram, but apparently there were these chatbots without their consent that were doing that. Now, moving on to Apple Start of the Week at $229, and we are blasting off on Apple as it was up like $10, up to $239 per share. That's about almost 4.5%. They are on the coattails of Google. That is because Google, as you know, and we'll talk about Google quite a bit when we get to that segment, they had that massive DOJ case, and we finally got a ruling. And yeah, there's some penalizing stuff in there with Google. I'll go over kind of a blog post that I wrote. It's not nearly as penalizing as it possibly could be. And for Apple, it opens the door for even more payments. There was this overhang on Apple that maybe Google would not be able to pay them at all to be the default browser, or anybody be able to pay them. With the ruling, not only will Google likely continue to pay Apple tens of billions of dollars a year for a search deal, but I believe this opens the door for Apple to partner with other companies, including Google, potentially on the AI side. We'll talk about Siri here in a second, but maybe even a company like Amazon, where if I do a product search in Safari, that it defaults to an Amazon, or I get like pinged some Amazon, or maybe Yahoo Finance. If Yahoo Finance wants to come to the top of certain search results, it might be able to do that, and you can go on and on down the line. It also opens the door up potentially in the future, and I think this will become as big as the search box is the quote default AI on Apple's devices. So whether it's Google or OpenAI or maybe even XAI or any of these, or Anthropic or any of these other companies, they are going to be paying for that real estate. And the Google decision in the DOJ case basically opens the front door wide open, not only for Apple to do that, but more or less puts it into case law, if you will, for them to be encouraged to do that, because now Google cannot stop other companies, but Google can continue to be the quote default, but they can't exclusively be the default. It is a wonderful deal for Apple, and this is why the stock is moving higher, and I think we'll probably retest highs with Apple later this year. This comes as the company is still, we'll put this in air quotes, struggling to a certain degree, integrating AI into some of its features, including Siri, but Apple is working on what they're calling a world knowledge answer, and this is essentially a web search that will act potentially maybe like some of these like a ChatGPT chatbot or Perplexity type thing, where it will answer questions for you and you can have a conversation. Obviously integrated with the voice would be Siri, and that would be the holy grail for Apple. My guess is they're going to have some proprietary aspects to this, the interface, potentially where the data is being stored and moved on and off of servers. But I think they're going to be partnering with somebody, and it's probably going to be Google. This comes as the company has a big announcement for their awe factor next week. This will be the iPhones and other potential products that the company announces, including likely an Apple Watch. This comes September 9th, so just 4 days from now, you're likely getting an iPhone Air, which will be a, quote, new model. Rumors are it'll be thinner and have just maybe one, maybe even two camera lenses. My guess is this will be a somewhat cheaper model, and also maybe not as good at battery life. I'm not really sure what market iPhone Air really fits into. People want less battery life and less camera technology. I would actually think what would do well for Apple is the opposite. A phone that is even thicker and bigger and has like 3-day battery life. I would buy the heck out of that thing. But we'll see what the company ends up announcing. They will eventually announce a foldable iPhone that will likely not come next week. If it does, the stock will probably rally very hard because no one's expecting this next week. You're also likely to get an iPad, this with ultra thin glass, as that technology has been more or less tested and maybe perfected to a certain degree by the Samsungs and the Googles of the world. Apple likely bringing that technology next year. Now, one country that is absolutely on fire in a good way from a sales perspective is India. Obviously, Apple has invested a lot there from a manufacturing standpoint, and it's helped with the tariffs and those types of things, and certainly during the supply chains of COVID. But Revenue rose by 13% over the past 12 months to nearly $9 billion in India, as the world's, I think the most populated country is obviously growing at one of the fastest rates for Apple. Moving on to Amazon, started the week at 225, and it's a good week to be invested in mega cap tech, because you were up 3.2% on Amazon on basically no news as the shares rose to $232. Now, there was some news. Anthropic, which is the maker of the Claude chatbot, they raised $13 billion. They're now valued at $183 billion, and they needed it. Okay, because like I use Claude quite a bit. I use it a lot for like writing and kind of like feed it some data, feed it some articles, and help me start formulating articles and different types of thoughts. It also helps me summarize video transcripts as well for the paid site. Just allows me to put out more content at a much faster rate. But I'm on Anthropic sometimes and I can't use it because it's shut down basically from a GPU perspective. There are supply constraints. So yeah, they needed this $13 billion. This is great for Nvidia. This is great for Amazon as well, which plans to ramp up their data center build up and what they call their Trainium, which is their custom silicon that they're running inside of AWS. This is all good news for Amazon. This is all good news for Anthropic. Amazon has a very solid partner here. They've obviously invested a lot from a data center perspective, but also from an investment standpoint. And I think the two companies are working well together. Now, they are going to limit Prime perks to household members only. Not exactly sure how they'll police this, but apparently your Prime benefits can only go to one other adult in the household and up to 4 teenagers and up to 4 profiles for children. My kids are still pretty young. They're not on Amazon yet, but maybe one day Dad will have to get them a Prime account. Moving on to Netflix. Start of the week at $12.05. This one drifting higher, up over 3%. The finished week at $12.43. Not a lot of news out of Netflix. Moving on to Nvidia, one of the few stocks of the group to hit the reverse button. Start of the week at $170. This one down pretty big today, 2.75%. The finished week close to $167. This comes as Broadcom announced earnings yesterday. Shares soaring up 9%. We're talking about $1 trillion company, $1.5 trillion valuation on Broadcom, soaring 9% in a week. That is because the company consistently gets on its conference call and just it's like the most bullish thing you've ever heard. And it's unusual for Hawk Tan. And this is where experience in the stock market really, really pays off. I have been listening and reading Hawk Tan's conference calls for at least 4 or 5 years. Broadcom has kind of been this boring company that's no one ever paid attention to. I noticed that he was getting on conference calls and saying very unusually bullish things. This was dating back 2 years, and it's just continued every single conference call. Very unusual for him to do that. And so when you see that, it creates a great opportunity. A similar thing happened with Oracle. I've been following Larry Ellison's entire career. About a year and a half ago, he started saying like unbelievably bullish things on the Oracle conference call. And so, yeah, of course, Oracle stock has skyrocketed. Same thing with Broadcom. They announced a new customer. They now have 4 customers creating custom GPUs. We know one is Google. We know one is Meta. We know one is likely OpenAI, and the other one probably Microsoft. And you could have maybe a Chinese company. It's been rumored maybe TikTok or ByteDance is part of their web universe as well. The thing about Broadcom, though, and they said, this is not me saying this, they literally said this on the conference call, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit. They only have 6 or 7 companies in the world that can be a customer of their custom silicon. It is a very specific thing. Now, it does chew into the sales a little bit of Nvidia. It definitely chews into not necessarily the sales of AMD, but the pricing power that a company like AMD will have. And so their margins, and I can understand why shares of AMD certainly slumped. Nvidia's in a different category, though. That is because their off-the-shelf or merchant silicon or their GPUs are so extraordinary. And on top of that, the software that it's paired with is also extraordinarily good as well. Also, Nvidia will sell you the entire bundle, the GPU and the networking together. And that is attractive for certainly sovereign governments, certain startups. And then when you look at the CoreWeaves and those types of companies, they love kind of the off-the-shelf, the out-of-the-box type things. Now, they're doing their own customizations, but sovereign governments are not going to be building their XPUs with Broadcom. They're going to be going to Nvidia. So there is a massive market for Nvidia. The market getting it wrong for a single day. The other thing, and this was maybe the biggest news of the week, and nobody paid attention to it. That is because, and this is fairly obvious, but AI chips still wanted by Chinese firms despite Beijing's pressure to not buy. Now, my understanding is coming out of China is a bunch of lip service by the government. They're saying, don't buy the GPUs. And they're doing it with one eye winked, or they're doing it with one eye behind the back saying, no, go ahead and buy NVIDIA's GPUs. This is something that'll play out over the next couple of months. But what we are going to likely see is the Chinese market opened up, and they're not going to build custom silicon. They are going to, in fact, it's illegal for them to do that. Broadcom would actually have to get license in order to do that, and they would have to develop that with the countries and the companies inside of China, and they're not going to be doing that. They're going to be buying these H20 chips, and eventually they'll come out with Blackwell 20 or B20 chips at some point, and this is a $100 billion. I mean, we're talking about a $100 billion market over 18 to 24 months that is about to be unlocked. That estimate in terms of revenue is not priced into NVIDIA stock. It's not priced into the valuation. It's not priced into Wall Street analysts' expectations. And so once that expectation settles in with NVIDIA, you are likely going to make new highs, and we'll see when that happens. Now, other bullish news for NVIDIA and others as well is you have other data center companies planning for an IPO launch when Anthropic raises money, when OpenAI raises money, when CoreWeave's rivals raise money. This all funnels into the semiconductor business, and it's great. Now, there's a lot of talk about quantum stocks. I know maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably a 4 or 5 when it comes to quantum. They're all still too small for me to pay attention to them. They're all too small for me to even care about them. But NVIDIA is making some investments here, including joining a $600 million funding round in Honeywell's quantum computing unit. What will be interesting is I know Honeywell is going to split off into 3 different companies, or I believe that's the plan over at the company. And so it'll be interesting when Honeywell divides up their business units. It's possible we can step in there and get a piece of kind of this quantum business. I'll try to keep premium subscribers especially up to date on what's going on at Honeywell. One of the reasons why I'm not recommending it, or it's not kind of an active recommendation, is simply because they are scheduled to break up the company, and I kind of just want to wait for all of that to happen and then step in. Moving on to the stock of the week, and it was Google. Start of the week at 208. And boom, up 12% and finished the week at 235, all-time highs on Google. You probably tell I own a handful of shares of Google. They are not going to be required to sell the Chrome browser, as that antitrust remedy was basically just a tiny little slap on the wrist. And Webbush, among other analysts, already calling this a massive win for both Apple and Google, and I couldn't agree more. Now, I penned a blog post. It's a free blog post, and I went a little bit different route. One thing that you might recall me saying on this show is there is a difference between a corporate lawyer and government lawyers. That is because if you want to make almost no money as a lawyer, go work for the government. Now, the work you do, by all means, it's great. Just like a public defender. God bless you. You're doing the Lord's work, but you sure as heck ain't going to get rich. The lawyers that get rich work for Google. And just like Patrick Mahomes is a better quarterback than almost anybody else that plays, just like Tiger Woods was a better golfer than just about anyone, there's a reason why you have the elite and everybody else. And Google's lawyers were elite. And in this case, they got Google a big win here. Really, the only thing that they're going to be required to do is share their data with competitors. But one of the analogies that I brought up in my blog post was, you can give a guy a $3,000 set of golf clubs. doesn't mean he's going to go win the Masters. You could give Yahoo and OpenAI and all these companies your data. It doesn't mean that they are going to be better than you. Mr. Beast posts videos across the web, including a show on Amazon Prime, but his YouTube videos and YouTube is still the best. Google dodged a bullet. We've got to thank their massive and very talented team of lawyers, and we are very, very grateful as shareholders that the government tried to step in and they got put down, and I love to see it. Now, just an interesting headline here. PayPal and Venmo users are going to get early access to Perplexity's AI browser. As these, quote, browser and AI wars heat up, you are going to see more partnerships here to bring in users and funnel in users. Just you as a consumer will want to keep an eye out for this. There's probably some great incentives in order for you to do this. This comes as the company continues to roll out Waymo, which is its autonomous vehicle program. These are true autonomous vehicles where if you're in San Francisco, San Francisco City, I'm talking about, you see these all over the place. Anytime I go there with my kids, they're like constantly counting them. They're going to roll out in Denver and Seattle. No word, at least on this post, whether they're going to be partnering with Uber on this. I find it interesting that they've partnered with Uber, but for the most part, they're going it alone, which is probably not good for the ride-sharing apps, particularly Uber, but even more companies like Lyft and kind of the second-tier ones, they're going to get squeezed out and eventually probably bought. Big news for Waymo and San Jose airport riders. Obviously, there are some security concerns when you allow these autonomous vehicles just to drive into an airport, but they received a permit to operate at the San Jose airport, which is kind of, you might call it kind of a regional airport, although you can get some major flights out of San Jose. I don't think you're going to be able to fly across the country, but you're going to be able to fly to a lot of connecting spots. San Jose airport is actually the closest airport to me, closest major airport. And so this is big news. Now, it wasn't all good news for Google, as we take the good with the bad. They were slapped with a $3.5 billion fine by Europe over ad technology. So they are putting their hand in the cookie jar over at Europe. And my guess is Google will appeal that with their fine Italian and European lawyers. Moving on to Microsoft. Start of the week at 502. This one also slipping in the wrong direction, but when you see this one technically, it makes a lot of sense. Down 1.6%, finished the week at 494. This comes as software is bowing down to the Trump administration, saying, you like Doge? Well, we'll give it to you. And they are providing up to $6 billion discount for the United States government over the next 3 years. This follows in line with what we've seen with other companies, although Palantir kind of put the blueprint out there. Now, Palantir stock, from a kind of a price to sales, price to earnings, is very, very much overvalued. But that aside, you look at Palantir's financials, and there's a reason why the stock has done really well. The financials are really, really good. Now, the stock is trading at a massive premium, giving very reward for that. But Palantir kind of went this strategy where they gave away software, they sold it really cheap, and then they kind of weaseled their way in, and I say that affectionately and complimentary, into much larger contracts. Microsoft, obviously far more entrenched. This is much more of kind of a write-down, but $6 billion to Microsoft over a couple of years is more or less a rounding error. OpenAI is expanding Stargate around the world as they expand into a data center in India. This is bullish for two companies that I mentioned earlier, which outside of the Mag 7 are must-owns. OpenAI to acquire an AI startup called Statsig or Status G. I don't know. These things tend to be kind of acqui-hires, if you will, where they hire or they buy the company in order to get the technical officers and the engineers, as if you would have put those resumes on Indeed or put the job postings on Indeed. It'd be hard to get the candidates. It'd be very expensive to get high-quality candidates to come to your company. So what do? You just go buy a company with a bunch of talent and you bring them in. This comes as OpenAI is seeing its workers get poached. So one way to retain them and potentially attract new ones is show that your stock is worth a lot and you can get really rich. As they increased their secondary share sales, this allows employees to sell shares that they've been granted or vested into the open market or into kind of private investment, if you will. They're going to expand that to $10 billion. This values OpenAI at $500 billion. And if the company would go public here very soon, it probably would achieve that valuation. Now, one thing that is flying under the radar is all the chip sanctions, and we can go back to President Joe Biden's administration and carried over to a certain degree by President Trump, is all of the, quote, chip sanctions where they've restricted or limited the number of GPUs going from Nvidia and AMD to a lesser degree into China has put that country behind. And from a military standpoint and some standpoints, depending on which way you're arguing this, that is exactly what the United States wants. And I think they have it. DeepSeek planning to a year-end launch of an AI agent to compete with OpenAI. Folks, the end of the year in terms of AI is like 5 years away. By the time the end of the year comes, the stuff that OpenAI will be shipping, because they're going to be running way more applications on Blackwell, which from NVIDIA's own stats is like 10 times more effective than Hopper. We have not even really seen the power of Blackwell show up. DeepSeek is years behind at this point. If you are not launching AI agents before the end of the year, you are years behind. China is behind, and that is why I'm particularly bullish on NVIDIA unlocking that market, because China will realize it. They're doing a lot of lip service and saying, we don't want these GPUs. We don't want these GPUs. That's exactly like my son saying, I don't want the Lego set because he's crying about something. No, he really wants the Lego set. He's just upset right now, and they'll come to terms later. Moving on to Tesla. Start of the week at 3:30. And I'm going to go through the headlines with Tesla, and you're not going to believe how the shares were up more than any other stock. But Google this week, up 6%. I mean, this stock is defying gravity. Up 6.4% finished the week at $350 per share. We're back up over $1 trillion valuation on Tesla, and it doesn't make any sense, and I love it. I love seeing the people flip out about it in my comments. I love seeing you guys on X. You guys are just watching money, free money, literally free money you could be making on this stock, but because your head is so clouded with politics and you can't get over yourself, you're missing one of the best opportunities that the market is giving you. This comes as the company is slashing its price on its long-range wheel drive. Part of Tesla's hate is these headlines are terrible. They slash the price. They cut it by 3.7%. I mean, if you slash 3.7% off of anything, like my bank account or the price of anything, I don't even think I noticed. 3.7% is nothing, but it is a price decline. This comes as registrations in Sweden. They register just 210 vehicles. We're talking about $1 trillion automobile maker. I mean, Rivian and Lucid might be shipping more cars in Sweden at this point. Last year was 1,348, 1,350 cars, down to 210. Needless to say, the worst might be priced in, at least from the vehicle sales number. Another headline, which is very misleading. Tesla falls short in India with about 600 orders since launch. My understanding is these cars haven't even shipped, and they're very expensive. This is targeting the ultra wealthy, if you will, in India. And this is the Model Y. We're not even talking about like the Model X, Model S, which is like basically targeting the ultra wealthy here in the United States. We're talking about a $70,000 Model Y. And the cars haven't even started to get delivered yet. So really kind of wait until you see deliveries. India is going to be a decent market, but I don't think it's necessarily going to move the needle from a big time perspective. This comes as China-made electric vehicle sales 4% year over year, which is actually not that bad. You've got mounting competition, obviously from NIO, but primarily BYD. But if you dig into it, BYD struggling a little bit from a margin perspective. There's also an expectations that the subsidies of the Chinese government will get pulled back heading into next year. So this could be like a Luckin Coffee type of thing. I remember Luckin Coffee really took off, and there was this, big fear that they would take over. I think the company's doing a little bit better now. I think they're even opening up some stores here in the United States, but it was heavily subsidized for a while, and then it basically collapsed a little bit, and similar type of thing will happen here. These Chinese rivals are getting propped up by the Chinese government, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If the Chinese government wants to do that and they want to do that forever, that's perfectly fine. That's the game that Tesla has to play, but eventually that rug gets pulled, and it's difficult for the company to compete. This all comes as Tesla is pumping the crap out of this Optimus robot. As Elon Musk, he said this numerous times. This wasn't just this week. He says it's going to be their biggest product yet. This also comes as the company announced what they call their master plan. This is the 4th version. The interesting part is these master plans have more or less come to fruition. And so there's no reason to believe that this master plan 4, which really talks about these robots more than anything, is likely to come to fruition as well. This also comes as we got new video of the Optimus robot, video that we've never actually seen before, by the Salesforce CEO, Mark Benioff. He was at the Tesla offices and posted somewhat of a candid video of his encounter with this robot. Now, the things that we notice about this robot is, first of all, the form factor has just gotten unbelievably better over the past year. Just how this robot looks, just from a hardware perspective, this is a thing of freaking beauty. Now, Mark Benioff and Tesla and Elon Musk got absolutely roasted because it is somewhat of an awkward encounter with this robot. Mark Benioff asking it question, there was quite a delay. It walks like an old man. They had to kind of get out of its way. People were kind of making fun of it. But you know what this reminds me of, guys? Is what people were saying about AI in the initial launches of ChatGPT. That it was slow, it was clunky, it would hallucinate, it didn't get things right. And now what is everybody talking about? They're talking about ChatGPT, they're talking about AI, and they're talking about everything else. The thing about the Optimus robot, guys, is this is not just a chatbot. You are marrying AI and hardware. This goes without saying. But for some of you guys with very few brain cells, this is hard for you to understand. But I want you to hear me out very carefully here. What Tesla is doing here is extraordinarily difficult. And there's literally going to be maybe 2, maybe 3 companies in the United States that are going to be capable of producing this at any type of scale over the next couple of years. There's at least 50 Chinese companies that can do this right now. And I don't write the rules between the United States geopolitics and the Chinese politics, but I think you can probably imagine it doesn't matter if President Trump is the president or in 4 years it's Bernie Sanders or a Democrat, or it doesn't matter. They are not going to be buying robots from the Chinese. Tesla is going to have a pole position, just like they had a pole position in EVs, just like Apple had a pole position with the smartphone for several years before the competitors caught up. Tesla is going to have a pole position here. And what I am seeing here with the robot from a hardware perspective, they're almost there. And now it's just marrying some software with this thing. And again, as we've seen with software over the past year, ChatGPT went from hallucinating and barely be able to do anything to now basically being smarter than any human that takes a breath here on Earth. The same thing is going to be true with these robots. We're laughing at it. Ha ha ha, this is clunky. Elon Musk is a loser. A year from now, this thing will be doing your laundry and probably taking some of your jobs. Tesla's trying to make a case that XAI will play a key role. And when you look at the robot, you probably can easily, comfortably understand how software and hardware have to mesh together here. And again, there are very few companies that will be able to do it. Will Apple be able to do something like this? But they'll have to make the robot in China. Could OpenAI do this? Could Meta do this? Could Google do this? Could Ford or GM or any of these companies do this? Absolutely not. Not in a short time frame. And so if you can marry the software, which Tesla wants a small stake in XAI, then you probably have a big lead. Now, this comes as the Robotaxi app is now open to all public riders, and it soared to the #1 transportation mobility app on the App Store, basically stomping on any moat that any other ride-sharing app has. This comes as Mr. Musk is being potentially awarded a new $1 trillion with a T pay package. But there was a lot of he had to dial back his politics. He had to ship like 1 million of these robots. He had to do a lot of things to hit the trillion. And one thing about Elon Musk is his time frames are almost always off, but he almost always reaches whatever goal he has set. Now, speaking of setting, we've set new highs on the S&P 500 this week. You continue to walk up. This is a weekly chart. You continue to make new higher highs on the S&P 500. You should know what to do at this point if there are pullbacks. Meta just confirmed a new higher high. had a little bit of brief pullback and bounced back. That one looking beautifully technically. Now, speaking of beautifully technically, we talked about it here on the show when Apple was down here in this range, this low $200 range. This was the time to buy. Obviously, in hindsight, you say, well, yeah, of course it was time to buy. Now it's 240. No, you can go back to the shows. This was the time to buy. You can go to my premium subscription and see when I was telling people to buy Apple. It was during this time. We are likely to make new highs on this one, probably back into the 260s. My guess is pretty darn soon. Amazon is on breakout alert. You're looking for a break somewhere up here. It's probably like the 240s, maybe as high as 250. You're looking for a break if you want kind of a low risk. We'll put that in air quotes. But if you're looking for a trade setup with Amazon, you're looking for a break to the highs and you buy it on the breakout with a stop loss just underneath that, or, lower if you want to be a little more aggressive, because when I show you Nvidia and Microsoft and really Google here in a second, when you break to new highs on these Mag 7 stocks, they just like to roll. Now, in the micro trend with Netflix, we identified last week that we made a high and we made at least, again, this is on a weekly chart, so this candle here was a lower high. But this week we actually broke above it. So that's a very, very positive sign. And again, we're splitting hairs with Netflix because that is as beautiful an uptrend as you can possibly get. Pullbacks in Netflix should be purchased. Nvidia broke to new highs here at 149 and then rallied all the way to 180, found some resistance at 180 and pulled back anywhere from here and a back test to the highs. This is like a buy zone with the idea you don't really want to see shares. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but you wouldn't want to see shares get back underneath the previous highs, which were at the 150 level. Google. Oh my God, that is not a fake green candle. That is a real green candle that went from 208 to 235 in a week. And here's the breakout for you. Google that last week was sitting at these highs, 203. And then you got the clearance from the DOJ and you went from 203 to 235. So this is what you're looking for, particularly with Amazon in particular, is you get these setups where you come and retest the highs and then all of a sudden you blast up above that and nobody is selling the stock. And honestly, this is like when retail piles in at the top, and this is what it looks like visually. You probably have all heard that, like, hey, retail always buys high and then sells low, or retail piles in at the top. Well, what does that look like? That's what this chart looks like, because you could slap on a volume. I don't know if I have my volume on here. It's like decent volume, but it's not overwhelming volume. I mean, you've seen spikes like this before, but interestingly enough, look at one of the other larger spikes with Google. It came at highs. And so retail tends to come in at these highs. Now, you did get a little bit of a clearing event from a kind of a court case. So that's a big deal for Google. Definitely not undermining that. I'm just strictly talking technicals here. You came in, you've just confirmed a new higher high. Now you're looking for the rollover and pullback, very similar to Nvidia. And you've got opportunities for this one as it pulls back, because they do pull back. Here's Microsoft. We broke out at the highs here at 460, rallied all the way up darn near 560. We've rolled over and came down to 500, but this is absolutely nothing to be concerned about. This is like playing out beautifully technically. This is exactly how it's supposed to play out. But this is why, if you're going to play these breakouts, you got to play them early. You've got to see these things and play them out. This is why, premium subscribers pay me, because every morning I already know where these charts are. And so I know what's going to happen. When they break, the alert goes out. Now, in the case of Google, it happens so fast that you don't necessarily have that opportunity. But Microsoft, you can see I'm on a weekly chart. Like, you had 3 weeks to get in here, and we rallied all the way to 530. And again, I'm talking from a breakout perspective. Rolled over. This is actually the moment I actually like buying the stocks more on the rollover, because you have very clear support down here with Microsoft at 450. You can kind of comfortably buy it probably about where the shares are right now, 500 to 450. So you've got a 10% price window. You're really risking 10% that this level holds and you make a new higher high, maybe later into next year, back up to 550. So you've got a nice little setup there. And then finally, Tesla, and this one just technically has just been ignoring all the bad news and just been kind of going sideways. You're tightly consolidating at this level. The thing is you don't got earnings on this one, and they're early to report. You don't got earnings for like 40 days. So you have a whole month here. And this one is kind of forming this kind of wedge pattern. And these wedge patterns, and when I say it, sometimes people laugh, but like these wedges break higher or lower. I can't tell you which way it'll break. The odds are that it'll break higher. That is because you are in an intermediate uptrend, you are in a short-term uptrend, and you are in a long-term uptrend. So the trend is higher. So if you were to predict which way the shares will break, it is likely higher. If it breaks higher, you are likely testing the 550s. If it breaks lower, you are likely testing the 250s. That is a wide range for Tesla, and this is why only big boys can hold this stock, because some people can't stomach a $200-$300 swing in prices, but that's probably more a reflection of your bank account than your stock picking ability. Folks, that was the FAANG Stock Recap Show. We've probably offended enough people on today's show. That was Friday, September 5th. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. The NFL has started, and so if you're like me, you're going to be sitting down, cracking cold ones. I don't actually drink. I just brought this out for effect. I've got to pick up my kids in an hour anyways. Probably shouldn't slam a beer, but if that's your thing, by all means, light it up, drink it up, do what you need to do. NFL football is back. I'm super excited. I hope your team has a great week. Your team stays healthy, has a deep run, because there's nothing more exciting than that, other than Google slapping down the DOJ and Tesla stock defying all the haters and all the gravity as it's tracing back to a 550 price target, probably by the end of the year. Folks, that was the FAANG Stock Recap Show for Friday, September 5th. Be sure to check out Equity Empire. Links are always down in the description below. We're coming up on 1,000 subscribers. Appreciate everybody that has signed up. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to me, Colin at myequityempire.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon. Good luck with your investments.